You want to see the kind of injustice that starts with a traffic stop and ends with a funeral? Three of the five former Memphis police officers were found not guilty on all charges. After everything we saw, everything that you saw, everything that the world saw, and somehow, I don't know how this happened, justice didn't see it. But I'll tell you why. I'm here with retired Sheriff Victor Hill, and we're your hosts of Hill of Justice.
Two brothers, sons of a Navy SEAL. Jerome Hill, a former Baltimore PD officer and narcotics detective. Victor Hill, the former sheriff of Clayton County and author of Vigilante Sheriff. Now, they've joined forces to break down the hottest topics in law enforcement and beyond on the Hill of Justice.
On January 23rd, Terry Nichols, a 29-year-old FedEx worker, was pulled over by members of the Memphis Police Department Scorpion Unit for what they claimed was reckless driving. Body cam footage later showed there was little or no evidence to the contrary. So after that, during a few minutes into the stop, Nichols was dragged from his car, pepper sprayed, tased, and violently assaulted by multiple officers. One of the officers said in court that the only reason why he hit him with a baton was because some of the pepper spray went into his eye and he got angry and hit him. He fled on foot, trying to escape the brutality, and was caught a few blocks away near his mother's house. There, what can only be described as a coordinated beatdown for nearly 3 minutes. Terry Nichols was punched, kicked, and struck all over the place. Literally held upright like a punching bag as he cried out for his mom. She was just 80 yards away from her home. Despite his deteriorating condition, which makes this even worse, no immediate medical aid was rendered. Paramedics came, they arrived, but delayed treatment for over 20 minutes. Now, because of that, 2 EMTs were fired for it. A fire department lieutenant was there, and she was fired for not rendering aid. Nichols was hospitalized in critical condition and died 3 days later. This is his story. So this entire incident was captured on body cam and poll surveillance footage, particularly of the beating. So this is what the officers faced. They faced second-degree murder, aggravated assault, aggravated kidnapping, which is just why we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about official misconduct and official oppression. So that is exactly what happened. And at this point in time, let's play the video, Keith. I want to show you something on there.
We are following some breaking news. 3 former Memphis police officers have just been found not guilty on all charges in the state trial over the beating death of Tyre Nichols.
The jury reaching that verdict on just the second day of deliberations. Let's get right to NBC News correspondent George Solis. He's been tracking this. He joins us now. George, take us through the verdict and the reaction inside the court.
Yeah, this verdict was unanimous over the course of 2 days after a trial had started back on April 28th. The jury coming back and delivering a not guilty verdict for all of the 7 counts in this indictment. They are as followed. The most serious, of course, being that second-degree murder charge. You heard the jury there saying not guilty for Demetrius Haley, Tadarius Bean, and Justice Smith. On count 2 for the aggravated assault act in concert, not guilty. For count 3, aggravated kidnapping, not guilty. Count 4, aggravated kidnapping, not guilty. Count 5, official misconduct. And then count 6, which was another count of official misconduct, both not guilty. And then count 7, that official oppression charge, also found not guilty. Within the courtroom, you saw a number of hugs that were taking place, obviously, from the officers there, the former officers, their elation on their faces after this verdict was read. Again, these 3 officers still face the prospect of years in prison after they were convicted in federal court of charges last year. Again, these were for the state charges.
Brother, do you see, out of all the videos that you watched, the officer's conduct, did you see anything in terms of that could be justified for doing what they did to Terry Nichols?
No, not after it got to that point excessive. In the beginning, of course, everything was fine. They were trying to arrest him. He wasn't allowing them to arrest him. He got up and ran. But when they caught him the second time, I think the whole world saw what happened now.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even the first time, it's the officer's fault. They didn't have clear control of him, and somebody should have had clear control. They didn't, and that's why Terry was able to leave. So you got that problem. So
Mhm.
you got issues, but we got the following charges that are problematic. We have the second degree charge. We have the aggravated assault by concert. That's a problem. We have the aggravated kidnapping. We have the official misconduct, I can see, and also official oppression. A couple of those charges were charged twice on that end of it. In any of those charges, do you see that? Or do you see issues there?
Let me tell you, I see a lot of issues. Let me tell you about prosecutors and what they do. They stack a whole bunch of charges on people for two reasons. They hope one will stick, and they figure if we put an astronomical amount of charges on people, one of them's got to stick. And then the other thing they're doing too is they're hoping that it'll force the person to take a plea. So, but what happens is they start to overcharge. Like, for instance, I don't get where the kidnapping comes from. I mean, officers don't kidnap people if we're taking them under arrest. Kidnapping is you're not trying to take them under arrest. You're trying to take them someplace else. I don't even understand how that charge came to be anyway.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Because of course they stopped him. They
Right.
weren't taking him, so they were under the full color of their authority on that end of it. Now it got perversed afterwards, but that doesn't mean that's a kidnapping in that
And let's
sense.
just say that in their infinite wisdom, they said, well, they didn't think it was enough probable cause for the stop. And of course, that's subjective, and the officers did. But they're like, well, if it's not enough probable cause for a stop, then it's kidnapping. Okay, that's asinine. I mean, if that's the case, you're going to be charging officers with kidnapping all across the country. So you get all these folks coming with this creative prosecution stuff, and they take charges and they try to make it fit something when it doesn't always. Probably the best example is in Georgia's murder and manslaughter. Murder means there's malice aforethought. So that means you had to plan the murder. Orchestrated. Manslaughter is, I mean, you just happen to be in a club and get in a fight and end up killing somebody. You didn't go there with that intention, but you did. It doesn't mean it was right. But the reason why there's a difference in one is higher than the other is because one, you plan to kill someone, be it an assassination or something like that. And the other one, it happened in the heat of passion. You got angry and things went overboard, like probably what happened with these officers right here. But there's a difference. But when you see this type of stupidity, I think the best example is here in Clayton County. Our attorney charged two coaches with murder because a track athlete was running around the track and collapsed. Was it too hot? Yes. Maybe better wisdom could have been used, but I don't think those two coaches sat there and said, you know what, is she dead yet? I don't think that was the case. They were just as devastated as everyone else. But you have prosecutors that will take the highest crime and put it on someone, hoping that they're going to plead to the lesser crime, of which probably was the only crime they were guilty of. In that case, it would be involuntary manslaughter. Involuntary manslaughter means negligence. That, it wasn't your intent or whatever, but if you had done a better job, perhaps the person wouldn't have died. Well, my thing is just charge the person with the charge with the elements that fit the crime, as opposed to stacking it up. But you know how that
Right.
happens, brother. You know how, right? Because we have grand juries, which is still a star chamber. So you wouldn't get a charge like that if you had to go to a magistrate court judge and get a warrant. But when you got 12 untrained people, and the DA can pretty much convince them to do whatever they want because they're going to give them just that much information. So you can pretty much indict anyone. Thus, we get this thing ham sandwich indictment. So you see a lot of overcharging. You see stacking of charges, and then you get these type of results. And even when you get the other results, it's still not good because the charges don't really fit the crime.
Right. And so the overcharged with the second degree murder, in my opinion, knowing that the conviction would never, and it would be unlikely that they would get charged for that. And I think that they were being over aggressive, somewhat like you were talking about. But, this gives them political cover in at least the opinion of the public. But that doesn't work
Who do you
on
think
that
it
end.
gives political cover to? The
Probably to the
officers or the
DA.
prosecutor?
No, the
Yeah.
prosecutors, without a
So,
doubt.
so what you saying? The DA really didn't want anything to happen, so they just did it. So if
No,
something they thought they can, well,
Yeah, it's somewhat like the spaghetti up against the wall. What you do is you overcharge them,
Uh-huh.
and you look as you're tough on crime
Uh-huh.
as a DA, you know.
Yeah.
And so, the community can't come back at you and say, "Guess what? You undercharged them, or you should have charged them for murder." Because in the court of public opinion, of course, they placate to that. They're going to say, "Oh, guess what? Not only did you not charge them with it, you should have. This is what it meant. No, don't do that. They should have never put that on there." That's
Yeah,
one
but
thing.
it's still it's stupidity on the hands of these prosecutors. They know the law. They know what the elements of the law is. They should charge people with that. If their thing is charging people because they think it's going to make the court of public opinion happy, the court of public opinion should never come into the actual court of law, because it should be what the law is, what's fair, what's not. Because we know that's not the case. You got the court of public opinion, you got mainstream media, you got social media, and a lot of people are convicted before they even get to trial. And a lot of people don't even have all of the evidence before them. So if something like this happens, there could have been something said at trial or brought out that we don't know.
Right, sure.
Right, that we don't know. We only know what we saw, and we don't know any other circumstances. Um, was it a damning video? Yes, but there's a lot of damning videos out there, and people don't know the totality of the circumstances. And maybe those jurors heard something or something was presented that the public don't know, and then we're trying to figure out what's what. Let me also say this too: if those D's did do what you said they did, I mean, it can still have a silly result because you did all of this to please the public and couldn't win.
Right, right, for sure. And I
Yeah.
and I want everybody to understand this too. We have a situation where we have to really think about is in criminal court, there is no joint responsibility in criminal law in that sense. Unlike civil law, where at least in civil law, you can go ahead and hold all parties, all participants jointly liable for damages for civil conspiracy or even failure to intervene. Everybody gets lumped into that. But that doesn't work in criminal court because guilt is always personalized. What you did. And one of the things they did was they charged for aggravated assault by concert. So just to dissect that is you got 5 officers, they're jumping on somebody, they're punching them, and thus Terry Nichols dies. Okay. Well,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about the aggravated assault portion of it, but this speaks more to the second degree murder charge. So which one of those blows by which one of those officers ended him? And I don't want to be that callous in saying that, but which one of those did that? You don't know. So a charge like that becomes bogus. It's hard to do. I mean, that's one of the loopholes in the criminal court systems that I don't think a lot of people understand or see often. But we see that from time to time, and we're just like, what are they doing? And I think that torpedoed them. So out of the 4 charges, I believe that all 4 had a long way to go. The only one that I could probably see that was worth any steam, but probably got avalanched on, was the official misconduct of the officers. And that happened because of the fact that, did they render aid? No. You saw he was deteriorating. He couldn't even stand himself up. On top of that, it was made more poignant when the EMTs were fired. The fire department lieutenant was fired because they didn't render aid. That's official misconduct right there. You should have at least done something. And thus, I thought that would have been the more, for state charges, would have been better. But the fact of the matter is, we are starting to talk about how if you can't get them in state charges, then what's the backdrop? Then it's got to be federal charges, right? If you can't get them there, you got to get them over here. And that'll confuse the public too, in many instances.
And I take issue with that too. I was about to ask you your opinion on that. So, and you wondered if double jeopardy, and double jeopardy is once you charge a person with something, if they're acquitted, you can't come back and charge them again. But of course, because of state court, and state court is different from federal court, we know that double jeopardy doesn't apply there. Sometimes I wonder if it should, because number one, okay, I'm not sure what the purpose of doing state and federal was. Let's say you did something egregious and the federal courts gave you life or 30 years or whatever. Okay. The average person, depending on how old they are, not going to live that long anyway. So then if you go to state and get an additional 50 years or whatever like that, what are we really doing? It's like an exercise in whatever. Hey, we're going to stack 1,000 years on someone knowing that the average lifespan is 70 to 75 years. So I don't know if that's very well thought out.
Money.
Exactly. And then sometimes I think the first time we really saw this was the Rodney King trial, because they were acquitted of the charges then. So it was like, okay, well, we couldn't get them that way. So I tell you what, we'll get them this way. We'll go with the federal charges. And of course, they come with the 242 charge, which is it's a broad and spacious charge that you can almost be used for anything. But I don't know if that's completely the right way to go. But here's one thing we know. Even though they were successful on a state level, I'm sure the federal judge is going to give them an extra year that he thought they should have got with the state court anyway. So if that's the
get
objective,
OJ'd, basically.
exactly, OJ'd, exactly. We couldn't get you for killing Nicole, so we're going to give you all these years for going and getting your stuff back and beating up those guys. And that's how the court system is. The court system is very, very political, and we think is justice is blind, but that's not the case there. Well, justice might be blind, but not the type of blind
I think justice is
that they
blind.
say. Yeah, it's not the type of impartial blind.
Well, I got something for you.
Yeah.
I got something for you.
Okay.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about what did not happen. And let's talk about maybe some of the mitigating issues that could happen because of this. Now, as I've said it in the monologue, everybody saw him get beat viciously. Okay. They had body cams. What's the point of a body cam? If it's showing everything that's going on and you're spending all this money for these body cams, and yet it's not even producing what it was intended to produce if you had issues like this. Because could it be at some point? First of all, let me go ahead and say this. Do you like or don't you like the body cams?
I'm 50-50 on body cams. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you this. Let me tell you what I don't like about body cams. What I don't like about body cams is the fact that they're constantly filming, and they film a lot of stuff where people aren't arrested and they're not taken to jail, but they're subject to open records request. So let's say you got someone in your family that has alcohol problems or whatever, and the police come, they talk to them. They don't go to jail, but they're on the ground crying, kicking, screaming, or messed up or whatever like that. But you don't take them to jail. You just, hey, let's get you in the house, get you in the bed or whatever. Well, anybody can get that body cam and use that and embarrass them on the internet or something like that. So you got thousands and thousands of video footage just in case a particular incident happens, so we could see if it's a justifiable shooting or not. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of footage. And that's the part I don't like. Now, there's the other part I do like. Okay. It stops a lot of the lying, because a lot of people will lie on cops, and at least we know that's not what really happened, and vice versa. We know we have law enforcement that lie. We definitely know we have prosecutors that lie. They lie to grand juries all the time. Hell, we have judges that lie. So I like the camera in that way. I like cameras in the courtroom so people can really see what happened as opposed to just having it transcribed. But it's a two-edged sword. It's not perfect. It brings in a lot of issues. So that's where I'm at. I'm 50-50 on it. I think, well, let me put it this way so people understand what I'm saying. It's like social media. It's a two-edged sword. Social media is one of the greatest things that happened to us, but a lot of equally bad things have happened as regards to social media as well. Is it something I want to see done away with? Of course not. We're not going to ever do away with social media. It's great. That's what we're doing now. Are we ever going to get rid of body cams? No, but you can't be naive enough to think that, okay,
Well,
it's the
we
greatest
might,
thing. Well, let me tell you this.
because we're building up the cases for that.
They're building up the cases, but let me tell you this. If body cams were supposed to stop this, it didn't.
Right.
Right. Everyone thought that when body cams came out, it would stop brutality. It hasn't.
Right.
The only thing
It
it's
hasn't.
done is film the brutality.
Right. That's it.
Right. But I think what people are looking for is a way to stop the brutality.
Mhm.
So that's my answer. I think there's good and bad to it, like there's probably good and bad to everything. As far as something, so we know exactly what happened, but then it's not perfect. Sometimes it doesn't catch the right angle. Sometimes it doesn't. And like that video we looked at the other day was not clear whether the person pointed the gun at the cop or not. Cameras get fuzzy. There's certain angles. It's not exactly perfect. It's better than nothing, but it's not perfect.
Right.
The only thing I don't like about it is all those thousands of footages of people at their worst. It's stressful for officers. We've had cases here where officers, the camera was on while they were using the restroom, and there's a whole process they got to go through to delete it so it doesn't look like they're deleting whatever. You know, officers got to constantly watch everything they say and do. That's good, and some of that is bad as well too.
Yeah,
and then a lot of these officers are judged for the reactions and how they speak or whatever. But you know, most people, when their adrenaline is going and they're in a high-speed chase, they're probably going to say a curse word. And I've seen situations where officers are cursing because they're in this high adrenaline state and they're like, listen to what they said or whatever.
Yeah,
It's a very 50-50 thing. It's better than nothing at all, but it hasn't turned out to be the greatest thing either. But it didn't give us exactly what everybody thought. We don't necessarily have the angle so we can see exactly everything. Sometimes they don't work, but it's better than nothing.
Right. I believe that the body cams that exist is a necessary evil.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. The issue starts becoming is now that we're starting to build up cases where that body cam is not assisting in the way that it had initially been thought out to assist in many ways. So now in the era of Doge, and they are very expensive with setting up those body cams and you know, and certainly the management of that. What I'm afraid is we're building up these cases that at one point or another to say, hey, guess what? Is it worth the squeeze of that juice? And somebody somewhere is going to say, guess what? It's not. And they're going to do away with it. And then we're going to have a country where we're going to have some states or maybe some municipalities have it and some that don't. And it's going to be problematic. I think that also with the body cams is we get this performative nature, whether the performative nature is by the public because they know it's a body cam on them, or it's the officers that sees what's going on and they have to go ahead and be a little bit more diligent. I think the courts have and will continue to do this. They will continue to go ahead and understand that police officers are going to use a particular street vernacular. And that's going to be because of the adrenaline that you spoke of and certain other tunnel vision that they may have, given the complexity of the stress of the scene. So I do think that that's going to be part of the issue where people are going to have to say, hey, guess what? Give them some break. You know, they may not talk nice. They may curse and so on and so forth. But this is a high stress job. I'm sure, and I will go ahead and say this, I'm sure that some airline pilots say the same thing. Probably their last words, but I'm sure that they say it too. And so it's just the nature of the job when it comes to the body cams. But I am concerned that we are starting to develop a structure that at some point in time, somebody's going to have the bright idea and say, you know what? Nah, we can't do this anymore. It costs too much. It's too much to hold. Unless technology changes. And that could happen too. I don't know.
Yeah, and that could happen too. You know, it's one of those things. You know, body cams kind of remind me of kind of like our gun problem. I think we discussed this before. There's countries that don't have guns. Like when I was in Japan, no one has a gun unless they're the police. So they don't have drive-by shooters. They don't have all of this. But then again, we can't take guns from everybody in this country. That's unrealistic too. And I think the gun right activists have a good point when they say if you take all the guns from the good guys, then only the bad guys will have guns. Well, there's so many guns here in this country. They're absolutely right because the bad guys are going to carry guns no matter what. So if you actually created a law like that, all the law-abiding citizens like us, we're going to say, okay, well, it's the law. We don't like it, so we're going to give up our guns. Now we have absolutely nothing at all. So the problem has gotten to a point to where I don't know if there's a clear way to solve it. So here we got with the cameras. If you don't have the cameras, there's a problem. There should have been a camera. If you do have the cameras, there's other problems that come up. Like you said, a court of public opinion. Like, for instance, how nice do you talk to everybody? Like, we want to be polite, of course, to elderly, to children or whatever. But if you're talking to an actual criminal and he's doing violent and crazy things, I mean, is it realistic that you're going to talk to him like, hey, the Barney talk, I love you, you love me, with a great big kiss from you and me or whatever? That's not realistic. They don't understand that. I came under criticism for calling a man that beat up a 80-year-old woman in a wheelchair and another woman a jackass. He is a jackass. But, some people are like, oh my God, he calls him a jackass. Why is he talking to her like that? You know what I'm saying? So that's what happens with the cameras. A lot. There was a video with a coach, and he was cussing out all of the team members and using profanity. And it was interesting to read the comments because there are people like, well, you couldn't talk to me like that or talk to my child like that. Then there are other people like, well, hey, he's a winning coach or whatever, and it gets to be this whatever, everything is filmed now. Everyone's going to have their opinion. The problem is when you take this stuff into the courtroom and you try to criminalize everything.
Right. And I think that it comes down to the eye of the beholder. But some of the reasons why there was an acquittal too were these factors. One of the defense was arguing that the officers acted within their duties. They weren't wrong when it comes down to the charges that they were saying. I don't know how you're really going to go ahead and say, hey, guess what? These officers, especially with the aggravated assault, you know, by committee, basically, it was, you're not going to get that. You're just not going to get that. I'll even add this onto there too. What if I told you that the jury was all white? And what if I told you that all the officers were all black?
What if you told me, is that what happened?
That's exactly what happened.
That's interesting.
That's a different dynamic, right?
Yeah.
So, you have all the officers that are black, and then you have all the jury that was white that decided to say, hey, guess what? For these three officers, we're going to acquit them. So I thought that was a different and interesting dynamic on that end of it.
Yeah, again, and like I said, juries are, I do believe we have the best
that's
system.
what they are.
Yeah,
That's
I do believe we have the best system going that I've seen in my travels across the world. But it's not perfect. And you're still dealing with human nature, and and that's the game that's played with jury selections. When you're trying to prosecute a cop, the prosecutors are trying to get anti-cop people up there, or people who believe the cops should be defunded or whatever. And on the other side is trying to pick a jury that's going to be more pro-police and more understanding towards the police. It's a very, very it's a very great area. I had a man tell me something, and he really made me think. And he was a civilian, but he said something that I thought was very introspective. He said, you send you guys out there, cops, and you put them in these high pressure, high tense situations, and then you act shocked when they overreact. They got all this adrenaline. They just got through driving 100 miles per hour. Somebody just struck them in the face or spit on them or whatever like that. And you expect them to be calm. And we do expect them to be calm. I mean, I did as a sheriff or whatever. I hope people be as calm and cool as possible and not overreact. But is that is that always possible? We're dealing with humans. We put guns and badge on humans, and when they're treated a certain way or attacked a certain way, they might react like anybody else. And of course, there are those out there. We have a friend that will say, well, they're the ones that took the job or whatever like that. But we got to be realistic. They're only humans, and sometimes they're put in high pressure situations
But
and
the
they
converse can
overreact.
be said. The converse can be said. The reverse can be said about this.
Exactly.
So is the public. They're only
Exactly.
humans too.
They're only
You
human
know,
too.
and so
Exactly.
you expect it. Because one of the defense highlights was that Nichols attempted to flee, and yes, he did. And
Right.
why did he flee? Was he fleeing the brutality that was going on, or was he
Right.
really
Was he
trying to just
scared?
right? Was he scared and so on and so forth? So as a law enforcement professional, you can't go here with the immediate assumption that it's always something sinister. And I think that that's the first default we do all the time. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that the next video that we do, the next show we have, we're going to be able to expel that out completely on that
Yeah.
end of it, because this is where I think where law enforcement fails the worst is that all of us feel as though that here we got a situation, and because of our job being so stressful, just because of the fact that we see the worst of the worst, that anytime a situation pops up, default, that's what the issue is. It is always dangerous. It is always going to be this and that. And we make these assumptions. That's not the truth, though.
And I agree with you on that. What I'm trying to say is this. I'm not trying to say that we should be more understanding when officers brutalize people. I'm not saying that.
Right.
And I'm not saying we should be more sympathetic to people who are fighting and trying to assault the cops. But I don't know. This is one thing we honestly don't know the answer, because we're taking human beings and we're trying to train them to be robots, and that's not necessarily possible. People always say more training, more this, more that. But a lot of those abilities we're talking about, Jerome, are really born. I mean, there are people who are born that they can be calm under pressure, and there's other people, no matter what you train them, they're going to snap under pressure. If there was a way to find a whole bunch of people that were going to react calm and don't overreact to something, we would have done that a long time ago. I would have
Long
done
time
that
ago.
as a sheriff, right? So I don't know if there's a particular training or there's something that we know that out of this group of people we're hiring, there's somebody, people have bad days or whatever
Mhm.
like that. Am I justifying what they're doing? No, but I think we got to be more realistic about that. But all we can continue to do is take situation by situation. But it's going to be hard to say, okay, tell this group of people that they can't overreact. Most of them, they don't know how they're going to react. This is a high stress profession. There's a lot of suicides. We just had a local deputy here commit suicide a few days ago. I'm not sure why, but it's a high stress profession. And again, if we had the ability to train people like that, then we should have no suicides. And that's something we need to talk about, because you had a lot of friends in Baltimore PD that committed suicide.
Mhm.
So just like we're trying to ask them to be perfect in every scene, well, you're an officer, you're not supposed to overreact. Well, if that's the case, they're an officer. They're supposed to be able to see all of this and not kill themselves, but they do it all the time. It's one of the highest suicide rate there is. And nobody really has the answer other than saying, well, this is how it should be. Well, a whole lot of stuff should be a particular way, but a whole lot of stuff, there shouldn't be any trash on the street, but we see it all the time on the boulevard.
Right. I will say
Because
this.
people shouldn't throw trash out their car, but
They
they
shouldn't.
do it all the time.
They shouldn't.
Right.
I
Right.
will say that the Terry Nichols case is one of the most visually documented, clear-cut examples
I
of
agree.
police brutality in recent
I
history.
agree. I agree.
Aside when you take a look at the George Floyd case. So, and yet the legal system still failed to deliver justice in the eyes of many. And although we can explain away why, I think that one of the things
We
we
can
need
only
to
speculate. We
right,
can't
we can
explain.
only
That's all we
speculate.
did was speculate what might have happened to court.
Sure.
We don't know what the hell happened to them.
Right. But it raises these hard questions, and more importantly, the hard questions have prosecutors got to stop overcharging. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
And that cannot continue the way it is. And that's why you lose cases in that way. So I just wanted to go ahead and bring that out because that's one of the things that I found was super disturbing. So I want to find out, what do you think? Let us know in the comments. Share this if you think this conversation needs to be shared. Certainly subscribe, like, and comment. We'll try to go ahead and respond to each and every one of you. And we do appreciate the channel is growing. We all appreciate everybody who is really supporting us. So from this point on, we just wanted you to come back next week because we have another explosive case that we want to talk about that you don't want to miss. So from here on out, we'll see you next week then.